Hello everyone. So let's welcome to another session on HortonWorks. So in the previous session we talked about installation of HortonWorks on Microsoft Azure. So this is the sandbox that we installed in the previous session. So today we're going to connect to the sandbox and create some tables. So there are two types of tables, managed and external tables in HIVE. For this session we're going to discuss only about the managed tables, and in the next session we're going to talk about the external tables. So let's get started. So the first step is to connect to our sandbox. For that, let's copy the IP address. Actually you need to start the machine first, so click on the start. So I already started my VM. So if you're just logging in, the first thing that you need to do is to start your VM. So once it's started, you'll get an IP address. Copy that one, and we're gonna connect to Ambari on port 8080. So here I created a user called James. So when we install the sandbox, we didn't create any user. So the sandbox comes with some default users. So you can connect using Maria_dev. Password is the same. So you can use that one, or you can create your own username. So I'm going to use the username called James. So once you log in to your Ambari, go to HIVE. So here we're going to create a table. So this is your HIVE window where you can write the queries, you can create the tables, and you can run some jobs. So for now we're gonna start by creating a sample data in our default database. So where we get the data from? I'm going to get the data from my GitHub, and I'm going to load into the VM first. So for that I need to connect to the VM. Go back to your sandbox, click on connect, and connect to this machine using the Azure user. So we are connecting to this VM with a username called Azure user, and the IP address is this. So in the previous session we created the ppk file. So that is what we're going to use for authentication. Alright, everything looks okay. Click on open. This will open connection to your VM. So once you're in VM, we have to SSH to our HortonWorks sandbox. So for that the command is SSH root localhost, and we're gonna connect on the port 2222. Give the password. So now you're connected to your sandbox. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get the data for the table we're going to create. So I already put some files on my GitHub. So the path to these files I'm going to paste in the description. So this is the path to the file. So copy the URL, go to your terminal and type wget and paste the command. The command is shift insert. Okay, so now we downloaded the file from this location into your VM. So let's look at the directory again. So now you can see the file called salesdata.csv. So let's look at the top 10 records in this file. So this file has headers. Actually you can see the same data here too. So it's the same data, but we are checking only the top 10 records. Here we are seeing the whole file. So this file has headers called region, country, item and everything, and these are the values within those columns. Alright, so we got the file. So the next step I want to do is copy this file from my local to the HDFS location. So to look at the HDFS location, the command is HDFS dfs-ls and a /. So this will list all the directories under your HDFS. So I'm going to pick a directory where I want to load this file. So I already created this path called user James sales. So this is where I'm going to load the data file called salesdata.csv. If you don't have this path, you can create it pretty easily by the command mkdir. So make directory will create this path, and if you want to load under a different user like Maria_dev instead of James, you can put Maria_dev and create that path. Alright, so I already have this path, so I'm not going to create it again. I'm going to just check that folder. Right now the folder is empty, so you don't see anything there. So let's start moving the file from my local to HDFS. So the command is HDFS dfs copy from local, and the local file path is this, and I want to copy it to the folder called user James sales. So this is your local file and this is your HDFS location. So by this, using this command, we're going to copy this local file into HDFS. Now let's verify if we have copied that file. Alright, so we copied that file, and right now we have this file in the HDFS location. Alright, let's switch back to Ambari. So the easy way to create a table is by clicking the new table command here, and here we're gonna select the option called upload table. So here we have some file formatting options. The type of file, right now we are loading a CSV file, so I'm going to choose the same one, but you can load the JSON and XML files too. The delimiter is a comma, so we are fine, we already set it to comma. We have the escape characters and quotes, which we really don't need. And I want to check this option where the first row is headers, because if you look at the file, the first row contains the row headers. So that's the reason I have checked this box. So now we have to get the data from that file. Let's say if the file is in your local, this is the option that you're going to choose, and click here and point to one of your local directories. I also have the same file in my local, so if I just click on it, I can upload the file, but I don't want to do that because I want to point it to the HDFS location. So select this option, HDFS, upload from HDFS, and what is the file path? Is the same file path where we loaded that file. So that's user James sales data. So the path is user James sales data. It's case sensitive, so make sure the capitals are always capitals, and click on preview data. So we already imported the column headers from the file. So one change I want to do here is remove the spaces. Spaces are not good in column headers because we have to put them in the square brackets or put them in quotes to not run into any issues. So it's better not to put any spaces in the column headers. So the data types, they all look okay to me, and just click on the create to create the file. So now we have started creating the file. So what will happen is this step will create the file and load the data. So while loading the data, it will create a temporary table. So it will take the data from the file, put it into some temporary table, and from that it will dump into the final table. So that is what is happening right now, and that is the reason you are seeing this file. Once the load process is done, this table will disappear. Okay, I believe it's still running, so let's give it few minutes. Actually it's already done. Okay, as you see, the table has disappeared. So if you select the sales data and look at the data definition, you'll see the table structure and the format of the file. The format of the file is ORC. So it converted our CSV file into the ORC format, and it moved the data to this location called apps hive warehouse sales data. So let's go to that location to check the data. HDFS, DFS, LS, apps hive warehouse, apps hive warehouse sales data. So in this location you'll see the file. It has this weird naming format. So this is the ORC file that the Hive has created. This file is not a readable format. So if you want to open and see the file, you may see some garbage. So that's the reason. I mean, it's not a readable format, but we know that the data has been copied to this folder. So that is how we have created the table. So let's run some commands to check the data. Select star from sales data, limit 10. Limit 10 is to look at the top 10 records. So now we are seeing the data. These are the columns: region, country, item type, order, date, and all these. And if you want to select only a few set of columns, just name them: country, order ID, unit sold, and unit price. So these are the only columns that I want to select. So you're seeing the data for those columns, and instead of the top 10 records, if you want to see all the records, remove the limit and you can see the data, and you can click these arrows and go from one page to other and look at all the data. So that is how you can create the table pretty quickly using Ambari. So that is one way of creating the table using the portal, but we can create the same. We can do the same thing from the Hive command shell as well. So for that, we'll go back to our terminal and we will connect to Hive. So to connect to Hive, what we need to type is we need to connect to the beeline shell. Beeline. Okay, all right. So now we are connected to the beeline. So now we need to establish a connection to our HIVE server. So let's go back to our services HIVE, and here we have the URL to make a connection to the HIVE server. So that is what we're gonna use. Paste that URL here. So by using this command, we are connecting to our HIVE server. So now we are connected to the HIVE. I'm gonna enter the username called James and give a password, or if you're using Maria underscore dev, use that username and password. Now we are connected to HIVE and we can execute the same kind of commands. The first thing I want to do is I want to see the tables in my default database. So these are all the tables that we have in the default database. So the sales data, that is the table that we just created. And if you want to see all the databases, you can just type show databases. It will list all the databases. So we have 3 databases: default, FoodMart, and Exademo. You can just, if you want to shift to any other database, the command is use, and this command will shift us to the FoodMart database, and in that you can check the tables. So that FoodMart database has 5 tables. Again, let's shift to our default database and check the tables. Use default. Okay, I think I misspelled the name. That's the reason it didn't shift the database earlier. So now we have shifted to our default database where we have these tables. Let's execute the same command from here. Sales data limit 10. This will show the top 10 records from the table. Again, if I don't want to show all the columns, we can just pick the columns that we want to see. Unit price. So these are the only columns that I'm interested in for now. So you're going to look at the data only for those columns. And if you want to know some information about the table, the command is description, DESC. So it will list the table, the columns and their data types. Or if you want to get more information, you can type description formatted, describe formatted. So it will give more information about this table. So it will list all the column names with the data types, and it will show the location where we can find the data and whether this table is a managed table or a external table. So this is a managed table, so that's the reason you see the type as managed table. So that is how we can create the table and look at the data from the HIVE shell and also from the Ambari. So here actually I want to drop the table and recreate from this HIVE shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the table called sales data. So now that table is gone. So the table is gone, and right now we have only two tables, sample 07 and 08. And if you go to your HIVE view, you see the same information. You won't find the sales data table anymore because that is gone. So I want to create the same table from this HIVE shell. So I'm gonna import the information from my GitHub. If I go to my GitHub, I have a folder called HIVE, under which I have the script. So this is the information that I want to use to create the table and load the data into the table. So basically we are doing the same thing as we did from the Ambari interface, but instead of using the Ambari, we're gonna do the same thing using the HIVE shell. So one way you can do it is by just copying the commands from here. So you can take the whole table, copy it, and paste it in your HIVE shell. So this will create a table. Right now we have created the table, but there is no data in it. At least we can see the table there. So we have the table, we have all the header information, but there is no data in it. So to load the data, we can use the command load data in path. So just copy that one, paste it. Alright, so we loaded the data. Let's type the same command again. As you can see, we have loaded the data using these commands. So we created a table from the HIVE shell. So if we go back to our Ambari, once I refresh, I should be able to see the newly created table. Okay. So again, I'm going to drop the table and I'm going to execute the whole file. The file name is manage_table.html. So I'm going to import this file and I'm just going to execute this file. Once I execute this file, all this information that you have within the file will be executed. So let's try that one. So before doing that, we're gonna drop the table again. Drop table sample data. Show tables. Show tables. We still have the table. It didn't drop. I gave the name wrong. Drop table sales data. Okay, now the table is gone. The table is gone. So I'm gonna quit the HIVE shell. I'm gonna come back to the HIVE shell again, but for now, what I want to do is I want to click on raw. So I want to import this file too. So to import the file, the command is wget and whatever the URL that you have copied. So once you execute that command, you will see that file here. So now we have two files. One is for the data, one is for creating the table and loading the data. So what happens here is so earlier we loaded the data to this folder called user James sales. Right now that folder is empty. Reason being, Once you copy the data into manage table, the data will be moved from this location to HIVE warehouse location. To explain it better, let me pull up some slides. Manage table works. So what we have done is we have copied the data to the HDFS location called user James sales. So that is the first location that we started with. So once we created a manage table, the data will be moved from the HDFS location to the HIVE warehouse directory. So here the data is not being copied, the data is actually getting moved, which means the data doesn't exist in the source location. It is moved to the HIVE warehouse location, and the table will point to the HIVE warehouse location. So once you drop the table, what happens is it will drop the table and also the data from the HIVE warehouse location. So the data is already moved, so it doesn't exist in the source location, and once you drop the table, the HIVE warehouse data will also be gone. So basically the data totally disappears in a manage table. So that is the reason the data from the user James sales folder disappeared because the data got moved. So that is the reason it disappeared from that folder. So let's go back and load the data again. Okay, now we know that the data has disappeared, so let's load the data again. So that is the command to load the data. Sales data CSV. So we're going to load the data again to the same location. Alright, so we loaded the data. Let's verify whether the data exists or not. Okay, we have the data. So the reason we are loading this location again, because we are creating the table and we are loading the data. So we are just making sure that this file actually exists within this folder. So as we just move the file, that file exists there, so we are good to load the data. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply run the command called manage table.hql. So let's connect to Beeline again, and I'm going to copy the URL for the HIVE server. So I copied the URL and I'm connecting to the HIVE server. Okay, I entered my username and password. Now I am connected to the HIVE server. So here I simply want to run the commands within that file. So for that what I'm going to do is, so before running the command, let's make sure the table called sales data doesn't exist within the database. So right now the table doesn't exist, so that is what we're going to create using this command. So if you want to run all the commands within the file, just type !run and give the file name HQL. So that's it. It will run these scripts to create the table and load the data from this path. So hopefully everything is loaded properly. So if I execute the command, I should be able to see some data now. Yeah, so the table got created and the data got loaded. So we discussed three ways. One is to load create the table from the Ambari. The second is to directly type these commands in the shell, and the third is to execute this file itself. So those are the three ways in which we can create the Hive managed tables. So in the next session we're going to talk about the external tables. That's it for now, and thanks for listening to this session.